Thanks for taking the time to listen to our latest content here on the Blood Red channel. Guy here with just a quick message. Do you want the very latest Liverpool FC news directly into your inbox? Well, then sign up to our daily LFC newsletter, which will bring you the breaking news and big events from around Anfield. To subscribe, just go to bit.ly/LFC newsletter. That's bit.ly/LFC newsletter, or click the link in the description of this podcast and pop in your email address. It really is that simple. That link once more, bit.ly/LFC newsletter. Well, thanks for your time, and on with the podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
In the end, as a dismal Liverpool team were demolished 7-2 by Aston Villa. Ollie Watkins netted a hat-trick as he and Jack Grealish ran rings around a Liverpool defence that looked so far removed from the one that won the Premier League title at a canter last season. It's the first time ever that Manchester United and Liverpool have conceded 6 or more on the same day. It's also the first time ever that the reigning champions have conceded more than 5. Joining me to react, analyse and attempt to hopefully pick apart what we've just seen, as you can see alongside me, is Theo Squires. And Theo, we're going to go fully into that performance very shortly, but your initial thoughts on the game, I mean, are you still shell-shocked?
Yeah, thanks for roping me into this one, Matt. I thought we were going to be having a nice, normal sit-down on Sunday, enjoying United's defeat, enjoying another Liverpool victory to go back level at the top of the table. But yeah, no one saw that coming, did they? It's just completely against what we've seen Liverpool this past 2.5 years. For 3 years, I suppose, under Jurgen Klopp. They're so good defensively normally, and it's not as though you can really put excuses there with missing players, because granted, Alisson wasn't playing, but Virgil van Dijk still there, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Andy Robertson. It was a strong Liverpool team, and for whatever reason, they just haven't shown up on the day. It does happen in football. It's when it shouldn't happen, but when teams do lose by this sort of margin, that it's when you take notice of it. And it's usually because it's like a one-off. It doesn't happen that regularly. And Liverpool in the past, when they have conceded a few goals, I think of when they got thrashed by Manchester City, when they got thrashed by Tottenham, they did bounce back. But this one stings a bit more, doesn't it? This one hurts a bit more because it's Aston Villa. And I don't mean to be demeaning to them, because they were superb today. They played start to finish. The players were just ran rings around Liverpool, and they deserved the victory, and it could have been more than 7. But when you've seen Manchester United ship 6 to Tottenham, good Tottenham team on their day. Last week, we saw City ship 5 to Leicester. These are the teams that in recent years have been near the top of the table, won the Premier League, etc. You don't do it to a team that's staying up by a point, by the skin of their teeth, because of a goal on the last day last season. You can write it off as just one of those days where everything went wrong. There was 3 deflected goals. A number of players just didn't perform. And you've got to have perspective too, because Liverpool have been so good by not having these performances in the past. They've still won the Premier League. They've still won the Champions League. And it's how they respond now, isn't it? Because you can't mellow on this. They can't just rest on this. They've got to go again and make sure it's a one-off and keep it as a one-off. So that's why it's all the more spectacular when it does happen, because you just don't see it coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dean Smith was watching videos of Liverpool extensively during lockdown, in particular their back line, but he certainly won't be trying to replicate what we saw this afternoon, because, you know, individually, collectively, it was just all a bit shambolic, really.
Yeah, and you think the last Liverpool away game against Chelsea, how much praise that defence got for how well they played defensively against Timo Werner in particular, and how Firmino was superb at centre-back. But it'd be very harsh to say, oh, it's because Joe Gomez was back in the defence why they played badly, because they were brilliant against Arsenal, and Joe Gomez was a big part of that. Liverpool, they've got such quality across the pitch. They've got a number of world-class players that you can maybe sometimes carry 1 or 2 players when they're not at the races, but you can't when 11 players or 10 players are not at the races. And that's what we've seen today. Dean Smith, credit to him. Aston Villa looks doomed, didn't they, before lockdown? You could really see them staying up, and he's turned it around. I think Aston Villa, they've signed really well this summer, and that's what we've seen today. Marley Watkins, a constant threat. I've read a couple of our pieces we've done with the Birmingham Mail reporter saying their best bit of business was keeping Jack Grealish, and he's like, well, that's clear, wasn't it? Couple of goals, couple of assists. It is crucial to them, and they're just a team to watch. Like we've given of Aston Villa this tag where they're almost a yo-yo team because they've gone down a couple of times. and they're not all that, but they probably are a bit on the rise now to get that bit of stability in the division. But that takes nothing away from the result and the fact that Liverpool have just shipped 7 and put in probably one of the worst performances they've ever put in under Jurgen Klopp. Can't think of anything this bad since the 6-1 under Rodgers against Stoke.
Yeah, similar sort of vibe to the game, wasn't it? Lots of comments coming in on YouTube as we are live here with Joe Gomez being a key sort of person being picked out. But you can't blame Joe Gomez for the last goal because he wasn't on the pitch. And, just the whole performance tonight, I think you said it before, it's too much to just pin it on one player. This was a bad night for Joe Gomez. There's no getting away from that. But he wasn't the only one, was he?
No, he wasn't for sure. And it's one where if it's one or two players that are letting the team down, I think you can see the frustration on the pitch. Like I think back to Tottenham when Dave Lovren got subbed, in the first half. You had players arguing. You had Jordan Henderson screaming all over the place, shaking his teammates virtually to try and get them to come together. But Liverpool, they didn't look at it today. The whole team was shell-shocked. There wasn't anyone taking responsibility for it. They all knew that they couldn't do anything to stop what was happening for whatever reason. Granted, Mohamed Salah's got his 2 goals, but you wouldn't say he played particularly well. You wouldn't say any of them didn't deserve to be on the losing side. 7-2, it's a ridiculous score, but as I've already said, it could have easily been more. Ross Barkley could have had a hat-trick. Jack Grealish could have a hat-trick. Watkins could have had 4, 5. He had that one-on-one, didn't he? He hit the crossbar. It's just, when you think back of it, it's almost blurred how many chances Villa had. It's like, what else did Liverpool do? It just was an awful performance by them, and not one you'd expect for a team that were 3 months ago, crowned champions.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, every time Aston Villa attacked, it looked like they were going to score, and 7 times they did. So I suppose one of the key things that has been picked out has been that high line that Liverpool have played. I mean, I tweeted during the game to say that it's exactly the same tactic that they used last season. So it's not the fact that they're playing a high line that is causing these problems. It's more the way that they're playing it. They just weren't at their levels. I mean, where do you stand on that? A lot of people, in the comments suggesting that Liverpool's tactics were wrong there. Do you think it was a case of that, or was it just a case of it just being a complete off day?
It's one where they've played it from the very start of last season. I remember when we were watching the Norwich game on the opening day of last season, Liverpool defence was very high then, and it's just been the whole way through. Bayern Munich do it as well. And I can see the sense in it. It does make sense when you know that VAR is going to correct any decision that's wrong. But you need your centre-back or your full-back to lead that defensive line to make sure you're all in line, timing your run perfectly to play the offside trap. And from what I saw today, Liverpool didn't have that leader, which you don't expect from them. They've got Van Dijk there. They weren't in a straight line for the majority of the time. And it's almost as though they forgot the offside rule, because it's all very well having a high line, but if you're in your own half and you time the runs fine, it works, doesn't it? You play the players offside. But if you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold not really sure where he's supposed to be in the opposition half, all Jack Grealish or Watkins or whoever it is has to do is stand on the halfway line, and they're going to get a clear run on goal. And because Liverpool are pushed up, they've got that extra ground and the momentum's against them to make the run back. But they're professional footballers. They should know the offside rule. This is a tactic they've played for a year and a half we're coming up to now. They should know you stay in a straight line. You stay just before the halfway line if you're going to do it on your own half, and you should have it perfect. For whatever reason, today they didn't. And it's not as though, as I said, you can't, it's just because I was there, because Alisson would not be the one who's organising that line because he does not have the best view of it. We've all played football at some level, and it's a very Sunday league thing, isn't it? You've all got one your fullback or your centre back saying, keep that line, whatever. It's right the way through from when you're playing in youth league to when you're playing in Premier League football. The offside trap is the same if you play it. And they just didn't get it right today. For you can't explain it, can you? Because they have got it wrong so many times in the past. And all we can do is just say it's an off day. And it's just one game. We've got to have that perspective. It's if there's a month of this form where they're making the same mistakes again, you get worried. But then there were those mistakes against Leeds United. They were getting in behind. It happened against Chelsea as well. And Liverpool, they've made a number of saves against Chelsea, against Arsenal, and against Leeds. It was just, 3 shots on target, 3 goals. And today, I suppose that luck ran out. But yeah, but they need to get it together. Normally, you'd say the international break has come at the worst possible time for Liverpool because you don't want to be going into it off such a heavy defeat. But I think for this one, it's probably actually come at a good time for them because it means they're going to hurt that bit more. They know they've got 2 weeks now where this is what the fans, pundits, media, everyone are going to remember it for. They've got 2 weeks to on the training ground to put it right. Granted, a number of them are going away on international duty, but you want it to sting and hurt that bit more. It can be a wake-up call. Like Liverpool, they stormed the Premier League title so easily last year. They probably took it for granted. There was probably a bit of complacency there. They're just going to turn up and win every game, especially when you see City dropping these points already, when you don't expect Everton to win every game all season. Leicester have just dropped points. United, Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea, whatever team you want to do, everyone is dropping points. And you think, well, Liverpool are just going to do what they did last year. So it could be a massive wake-up call for them, and almost a blessing in disguise if Jurgen Klopp uses it the right way. Going into the derby, as I'm sure we're going to come to, it certainly makes that one a bit more important, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's all about that bouncing back, isn't it? I think the 4-1 defeat at Tottenham, that was a fairly shambolic performance, but then Liverpool did exactly that, and that is exactly what they've got to do in that Merseyside derby, as you say. We do have to talk a little bit before then on Adrian, though. You mentioned that Alisson was out before. Jamie Carragher in commentary for Sky Sports suggesting that Liverpool potentially could go out and look to buy another goalkeeper on deadline day. So bad was Adrian today. I think that's possibly unlikely to say the least from a Liverpool perspective. But is it becoming a little bit of a concern, do you think, given the fact that Jurgen Klopp said before kickoff that it looks like, certainly for the Merseyside derby, Alisson would be a doubt, and potentially a little bit further after that too?
Well, isn't the talk that it would be a dislocated shoulder? I think Hugo Lloris got something, didn't he, last year, and he was out for a couple of months there. So it's, well, worst case scenario, you could be without Alisson going up until the Christmas period. And Liverpool, they lost him for a similar length of time last year, but they were getting the wins, but they weren't getting the clean sheets. And Adrian, he's a very hot and cold keeper because he does make some good saves. He has his moments. We've seen his moments when he's played so far this season already, but he's got a mistake in him, and he's always had a mistake in him, even before he was at Liverpool. One of the moments that always stands out for me was, the famous Wayne Rooney goal from the halfway line against him, and everyone thinks, oh, it's a brilliant bit of play from Rooney. He didn't have a clue where he was in his goal there, and that's not even one where he's gifted it to the opposition. And we've seen it worse. Like, he cost Liverpool the Champions League last year. He cost Liverpool the FA Cup last year. And it's one where you got to regroup, you got to get round him. They probably could do with someone who's a bit better than him, but then you don't expect 2 years in a row to lose your keeper, to your first choice keeper, to a serious injury. I was thinking back before, when was the last time we had a Liverpool number two who played so many games knowing they were a number two? The only ones we can say are, say, Chris Kirkland, Luis Karius, Simon Mignolet, but even then, when they were given their stints in goal, that's when there was a debate over who should be the first choice keeper. You've never had a number two going in as number two playing this often. And it's a very late thing to do, to go out and say you're going to go and sign a keeper. I don't think anything will happen tomorrow, but then who knows? Things can happen very quickly. Potentially, they will need someone just for that extra cover going up until Christmas. That's what they did with Andy Lonergan last year, of course, got him in as a free agent, because if you have Keller as your number two, that's a bold call. With Adrian as your only senior goalkeeper. A benefit of that, no Carabao Cup games. So, he's just going to be playing in Europe, playing Premier League, but games are still going to be 2-3 times a week. You need that experience there. One thing that could play in Liverpool's favour if they do decide Adrian's not good enough or they want something a bit more is they can still sign goalkeepers, whatever players from the EFL for another couple of weeks. So that's a market to look at. But then you think, how many teams in the Premier League or in world football have a proper world-class number two goalkeeper? Manchester United have been very fortunate. They've had Sergio Romero, who is a class goalkeeper for what he does, and now they've got Dean Henderson as well. But the rest of the time, you see goalkeepers going, you don't think, that number two is better than what we've got. In goal for Villa today, Martinez. Arsenal, that's probably one that goes against it a bit, but just doesn't happen that often in football. If Alisson now is one of these players where you've got to have that cloud over his head of injuries, even though it sounds like it was another freak injury in training, Adrian might not be the long-term answer.
Yeah, certainly something for Jurgen Klopp to think about, but he doesn't, of course, have long. 11 p.m. tomorrow is that deadline for transfers. Liverpool did have injuries. They did have players missing, of course, not just Alisson, Thiago, Henderson, Mane. They would have probably all started when fit. There is fixture congestion as well. Obviously, no fans in stadiums. That is going to mean a few freak results like this, but none of those really go half the way to explaining what happened tonight. It's not really an excuse for Liverpool, even though those things are the case.
No, like Sadio Mane is probably Liverpool's best player so far this season, probably in 2020. He has such an impact when he plays. But it's not as though Liverpool are this team now where one man changing is to that extent. They are not a team where they've had Steven Gerrard carry them through or Luis Suarez carry them through for so long now, because Jurgen Klopp has built a world-class squad full of world-class players. So you can't put it to individuals. I'd like to think if Jordan Henderson was fully fit, in form, starting in that midfield, it wouldn't have been a 7-2 defeat just because he's the captain. You expect that bit more steel from him there and that aggression to not let it happen. But he's not going to have made much difference to stop it being a defeat. You'd like to think Liverpool would have been better on the ball if they'd had Thiago in there, pass it around and more, can dictate it, can control the game. But it's still, you can't go around into a season when you've got this squad, you made such a big deal of building this team, so more than just a starting 11. So when players duck out, oh, it's fine, we've lost today because that player's missing. They've got the options there. Like Sadio Mane missing today because of coronavirus. Well, they've just spent, 30-40 million on Diego Jota to be that replacement. It was an opportunity for him there. They've still got so many midfield options, like Naby Keita subbed at half-time, Gino Wijnaldum's still there, Fabinho. They've spent a lot of money on that midfield. Just because a couple of players are missing, it's no excuse to go and lose by that scale in such a dismal performance.
You mentioned Diogo Jota there. Is that a kind of, well, I suppose if there are any positives to take for Liverpool, Mohamed Salah's 2 goals and Jota getting a start on that left side in the Premier League, possibly those are the only 2, really, would you say?
I don't really want to take positives from it, from what happened on the pitch, because we get to this stage now where you almost can't criticise Liverpool because they've been that good for 2 years. And it's like they've always got to find that positive spin for what has happened because they are such a special team to watch. But when they've been awful, let's just sit back and say, no, that was awful. But without getting carried away, you don't want to be saying, oh, Joe Gomez should never play for the first team again or anything like this. They've just had a really bad day at the office and they're a professional football team, the professional players who should be hurting and they should find a way to bounce back. Yeah, Mohamed Salah will be happy that he's got a couple of goals and Jota will be happy to start. But if you go to him, right, would you have rather started your first game in the Premier League for Liverpool or come on for 2 minutes at the end and Liverpool have won 2-1 with a scrappy goal? What's he going to choose? Mohamed Salah's like, you're not scoring, but Liverpool winning. What's he going to choose? The team performance and the result is what is important. That is what wins football. That is what wins titles. And it didn't happen for Liverpool today. It's no consolation for the fans, for the team, that Mohamed Salah's got another 2 goals. And he's, apart from the small fact that at least they've got a striker scoring goals. Normally, you score twice away from home, you're going to win a game, especially when you go to a team that you'd expect to be struggling. You don't chip 7. Can't find positives out of it. You can't spit it. It just wasn't enough today.
No, absolutely. One of the big disappointments for me, I think, was Roberto Firmino's performance. He came off in, I think, minute 68 and was slightly fortunate for me to last that long, really. I mean, is that a concern for you at all going forward, or is it just the same as really the team as a whole, in that you'd say, well, you just have to draw a line under what happened today, forget that it happened and move on once the international break is over?
For Firmino, I suppose the concern is it's not the first time he's gone missing in the game. Like we've said, that he's so important to how Liverpool play because he gets the best out of Salah, he gets the best out of Mane. But the goals are drying up, and when Liverpool aren't performing, he's the easy scapegoat, isn't he? Because he's the number 9 who isn't scoring goals, who's not getting assists, not had the best start to the season. He had an all right pre-season, but he's had a little dip. And it is a concern because he is so crucial to how Liverpool play when they're at their best. If you think of one player, when you think of Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool and how they play, it is normally Roberto Firmino. But when you've got Jota there now, you've got Minamino there, maybe it's almost getting to the stage where you take him out the limelight. Because it's not just a couple of weeks, is it? He wasn't at the races for a lot of last season. He wasn't at the best post-lockdown. Granted, he finished the season with his goal at Anfield when Liverpool lifted the Premier League trophy. That sort of forgot that stat, didn't it? What do you judge Roberto Firmino on? Do you judge him for that link-up play, for the assists, or do you want him to be a number 9 who's going to provide the goals? Today, he didn't do either, but none of his teammates did either as well. His form is slowly becoming a concern, but I think it's easy to focus on 1 or 2 if you want and make them a scapegoat after a performance like that. When they're a team, they were so good as a team to win the Premier League, the Champions League, but they were so awful today to lose by that scale today. So it's a bit too early for me to say he needs to be dropped, but he needs to certainly start turning his form around, and soon. And what better than potentially a Merseyside derby winner at Goodison?
Yeah, that Merseyside derby, of course, to come next for Liverpool. A very difficult game at the best of times, but certainly you would think after today's game as well. And just a final question then, obviously, with Everton to come, Manchester City dropped points yesterday. It really feels not just frustrating in the way that Liverpool played today, but also a little bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it does. Like if Liverpool had won today, they'd have gone level with Everton at the top of the table. They'd have been 8 points clear of City. I think 5 points clear of fifth. They could have gone into that derby knowing no matter what the result was, they'd be first or second. Now they're going to need a result to make sure that is still the case. The big disappointment today was the goal difference taker in that battering. You compare to last season, I think it was 5 games before City had lost 5 points, and by that point there was a 5-point gap, and it had that potential to be 8. We all know when City had that gap, I think it was when they lost the first game to Norwich. That's when they couldn't catch up with Liverpool for the whole of that season. And that's when that first season, hang on, Liverpool could be onto something here. And you want to make that statement early on, don't you? You want to get that foothold again to go, this is Liverpool, nothing's changed. They are this good team who are going to storm to victory, who are going to win the title again. But we've always said it's going to be harder for them this year. And just because there isn't the consistency in a Chelsea or a Manchester United or a Manchester City so far, it doesn't mean they're going to walk the Premier League title again. It just so happens Everton are the team of all teams to be leading the way with the 100% winning record. They've had a really good transfer window. Seen a few of their games, and James Rodriguez looks the real deal. And it does add that extra to the derby. You think in recent years, you go to Goodison, and it's been really tetchy. It's been horrible 0-0s where neither team's really deserved it. There's not been many chances. And there would have been, I suppose, in the fan base, a slight concern that this could be the year Everton win a derby just because they've been so informed, they're going to be up for it more. And you think, well, without fans, who's that going to play in favour for? But this means it's even more important to Liverpool because they don't lose games very often. And when they do, they don't lose games back-to-back very often. So to then lose 7-2 and to potentially lose a derby, they can't really settle for a draw. They've got to go and put in a performance. They've got to respond and make a statement that it was just a horror show and a one-off. And if they go and then respond in the derby and beat Everton, granted the goal difference has taken an absolute battering today, but a victory would put them top of the table again, potentially. Still early days, isn't it, in the title race? If you want to call it a title race just now, we're only 4 games in. It's just shaping up to be another mad season of Premier League football.
Yes, not the game that many thought would take place today, that much is clear. Not the best way to head into an international break either. Next up, of course, that Merseyside derby in a couple of weeks' time where Liverpool will have to perform much better than they did today. That goes without saying. For now, though, that's all we've got time for here on the Blood Red channel. From myself, Matt Addison, and from Theo Squires. Until next time, it's goodbye.